What if I told you that some of history's greatest spiritual teachers might have been wrong about how wisdom works? Imagine two people claiming they found a cure for a disease. One says, "God gave me this formula." The other says, "I discovered this through careful observation and testing, and I'll show you exactly how I did it." Which would you trust more? In a world where everyone claims to have the truth, from religious leaders to self-help gurus to social media influencers, understanding the difference between these approaches isn't just historically interesting. It could change how you seek wisdom in your own life. Moses climbed Mount Sinai to receive God's wisdom. Muhammad meditated in a cave until the divine words came. But when Siddhartha Gautama sat under a tree one night, he did something entirely different. He looked within. No burning bush, no divine voice, not even a spiritual text message, just pure observation. Think about history's most famous prophets for a moment. They share something in common. They all said their wisdom came from above. And let's be honest, that's a pretty bold career move. There's no LinkedIn job posting that says, "seeking profit." Must have experience with divine revelations, comfortable with frequent persecution, miracle working a plus. Moses didn't write the 10 Commandments himself. He received them from God on Mount Sinai. Muhammad didn't compose the Quran. He conveyed what was revealed to him by the divine. And that's what makes this story fascinating. While other great teachers said, "God sent me to tell you this," Buddha said something more like, "Look, I found something amazing. Want to see for yourself?" It's like the difference between someone giving you a treasure map versus teaching you how to find treasures anywhere. And this prophetic tradition continues today, though it looks a little different. Instead of burning bushes, we have viral tweets. Instead of stone tablets, we have TikTok wisdom. Everyone's a guru now. Just add a sunset background and some inspirational music. But here's the thing about Buddha's approach. He'd probably scroll through all of that and say, "Cool story, but have you tried actually sitting quietly and checking if any of this is true?" I'm Matt, and today we're exploring a question that changes how we see spiritual teaching altogether. Was Buddha a prophet? After jumping into his life story and examining Buddhist myths on this channel, I realized his way of discovering and sharing truth was revolutionary. Not just for his time, but maybe especially for ours. What he found under that tree, and more importantly, how he invited others to find it too. That's what we're exploring today. Because sometimes the most powerful teachers aren't the ones who claim to have all the answers, but the ones who show us how to find them ourselves. Before starting our exploration, let me be clear. This video isn't about judging or ranking religions. It's about understanding different approaches to wisdom. Every tradition has its value, and millions find meaning in prophetic traditions. We're exploring Buddha's unique approach to understand what it offers us today. The word prophet itself tells us a lot. It comes from ancient Greek, meaning one who speaks for another. A prophet is basically a messenger, delivering words of wisdom from the divine to the rest of us. They're like spiritual ambassadors, bringing messages from a realm most of us can't access directly. This messenger role shaped how spiritual wisdom was traditionally shared. The prophet says, "These aren't my words, they're God's words." Their authority comes from being chosen to deliver these divine messages. When people asked, "How do you know this is true?" the answer was clear: because God said so. In most traditions, becoming a prophet wasn't something you could train for or choose to do. You were chosen. It's not like today's career planning where you can say, "I think I'll become a prophet after college." The divine picked you, often when you least expected it. Moses was tending sheep. Muhammad was meditating in a cave. They weren't looking to become prophets. Prophecy found them. Their teachings came with divine authority. When prophets spoke, they weren't sharing personal opinions or philosophical ideas. They were delivering messages straight from the source. It's kind of like getting a message directly from the CEO versus hearing office rumors. There's a certain weight to it, a divine stamp of approval. And people could tell these weren't ordinary messages. Prophets often performed miracles or showed signs to prove their connection to the divine. Moses parted the Red Sea. Jesus healed the sick. These weren't just teachers with good ideas. They were proving their divine connection through extraordinary acts. But here's something interesting about prophets. They often faced serious pushback. Standing up and saying, "God sent me," wasn't exactly a ticket to an easy life. Moses dealt with doubters in the desert for 40 years. Muhammad faced persecution in Mecca. Being a prophet often meant facing rejection, danger, and hardship. Despite these challenges, their impact on history is undeniable. The messages they delivered shaped entire civilizations. Their words became sacred texts. Their laws became foundations of societies. And their teachings still guide billions of people today. And this prophetic tradition continues today. Consider Joseph Smith, who founded Mormonism in the 1820s claiming divine revelations, or the Bab and Baha'u'llah, whose prophecies birthed the Baha'i faith. Even now, movements like Falun Gong and Cao Dai blend prophetic elements with Eastern wisdom. Beyond the Abrahamic faiths, prophetic figures appear worldwide. In African traditions, prophets like Nonkawus sparked powerful movements. Native American prophets like Wovoka and Black Elk received visions that guided their people through cultural upheaval. In India, figures like Ramakrishna claimed direct divine experiences while bridging multiple religious traditions. This role of prophets isn't something stuck in ancient history. Even today, prophetic traditions shape how many people understand spiritual wisdom. When someone reads the Bible, the Quran, or other sacred texts, they're connecting with messages their tradition believes came directly from God through these chosen messengers. Prophets also did more than just deliver messages. They lived them. They weren't just mailmen dropping off divine letters. They embodied their teachings, showed people how to live them, and built communities around these divine instructions. Think of them as spiritual architects, building bridges between heaven and earth. So when we look at Buddha's story, you might expect to find similar elements: divine messages, miraculous signs, claims of being chosen by God. But that's where things get really interesting, because Buddha's path to wisdom looked nothing like this traditional prophet model. But what if there was a completely different way to find truth? One that didn't require divine revelation at all? Picture the scene. A man sits under a tree, eyes closed, breathing slowly. No dramatic thunderbolts, no divine voices, no angels descending from the heavens. Just deep, careful observation of his own mind and experience. This was how Buddha found his path to wisdom. When Siddhartha Gautama sat under that Bodhi tree, he wasn't waiting for a message from above. He was doing something that might sound simple, but was actually radical. He was watching how his own mind worked. It's like he was being a scientist of consciousness, studying the laboratory of his own experience. People would come to him with big questions. Did God create the universe? What happens after death? Are you a messenger from heaven? Buddha's response was revolutionary. Instead of claiming divine authority or giving cosmic answers, he told them this story. Imagine you're shot with a poisoned arrow. The doctor comes to remove it, but you stop them. Wait! Before you treat me, I need to know who shot the arrow. What's their name? Their family? What kind of bow did they use? What were the feathers on the arrow made from? Would that make sense? You'd die before getting those answers. Just like that person, we're all struck by the arrow of suffering. Buddha's priority wasn't explaining the universe. It was showing us how to remove the arrow. When one monk kept pushing him about whether the universe was eternal or if the soul was separate from the body, Buddha simply said, "These questions are like trying to count all the fish in the ocean when what you really need is to learn how to swim." His message was clear. Theoretical knowledge matters less than practical wisdom that can transform our lives. What Buddha did say was deeply practical. He'd tell people, "Look, Here's what I discovered through direct observation. Try it yourself. Test it out. See if it works in your own experience. No, believe me because God said so. Instead, it was more like, here's what I found. See if you find the same thing. Think of it as the difference between being handed a map and being taught how to navigate. Other teachers gave specific directions. God says go this way. Buddha taught people how to read their own inner compass. Here's how you can find the way yourself. Here's what to look for. Here's how to tell if you're on the right path. His analytical methods were surprisingly systematic. Take his approach to understanding suffering. He observed how pleasure leads to craving. He tracked how craving creates attachment. He documented how attachment causes anxiety. He tested how letting go brings peace. Each step was observable, testable, repeatable, like a scientist running experiments in the laboratory of his own mind. His discoveries came through a method anyone could use. When he found that greed leads to suffering, it wasn't because a divine voice told him. He saw it happening in real time, in his own mind. When he realized that compassion brings peace, it came from direct observation, not heavenly instruction. This wasn't just a personal quirk, it was a deliberate teaching strategy. When people wanted to become his followers, he didn't ask them to have faith in his divine authority. Instead, he'd say something pretty revolutionary for his time. Don't accept my teachings out of respect for me. Test them the way you'd test gold, by cutting, burning, and rubbing it to prove its value. In a way, Buddha was doing something more challenging than delivering divine messages. He was teaching people to be their own investigators of truth. It's like instead of giving people fish, or even teaching them to fish, he was showing them how to understand the entire ecosystem of their own minds. And here's what made this approach so powerful. It worked regardless of what people believed about God or the universe. You didn't need to accept any particular faith or convert to a new religion. A merchant could use these methods. A farmer could use them. Even followers of other religions could use them without giving up their beliefs. Take meditation, for example. Buddha didn't present it as a mystical ritual or divine command. He taught it as a practical tool for understanding how our minds work. It's like he gave people a microscope to examine their own thoughts and feelings. Here's how to focus your attention. Here's what you might notice. Here's how to learn from what you see. This isn't just ancient history. It's what makes Buddha's approach so relevant today. In a world where we're bombarded with people claiming to have absolute truth, Buddha's message is refreshing. Don't take my word for it. Look for yourself. Test it out. Make your own discoveries. This radical approach would soon face its greatest test. Could it really transform lives as powerfully as divine revelation? This teaching style turned the whole guru-student relationship upside down. While other spiritual leaders were saying, "Follow me, I have the answers," Buddha was saying, "Let me show you how to find answers yourself." It's not that he had no answers. He had plenty. But how he shared them made all the difference. Take his first teaching after enlightenment, the Four Noble Truths. He didn't present them as commandments or divine revelations. He laid them out like a doctor explaining a diagnosis. Here's the problem. Here's the cause. Here's the cure. Here's how to apply it. He was teaching people to understand their own lives, not just giving them rules to follow. His famous dialogues show this perfectly. When people came to him with questions, he often answered with more questions, not to be difficult, but to help them think deeper. It's like he was holding up a mirror rather than handing down wisdom from above. One time, a young man asked him about the best spiritual path. Instead of giving a straight answer, Buddha asked him about music. What happens when you tune a string too tight, too loose, just right? Through this simple example, the man discovered the answer himself. Balance is the key. Even with his closest students, Buddha kept this approach. He wasn't interested in creating dependent followers. He wanted to create other awakened beings. people who could see truth as clearly as he did. "Be a light unto yourself," he told them. That's pretty different from saying, "Just trust me, I got this message from God." Some of Buddha's most successful students weren't the ones who blindly believed everything he said. They were the ones who took his invitation to investigate seriously. Take Sariputta's story. Before meeting Buddha, he was already a respected scholar searching for truth. When he heard just one verse of Buddha's teaching about cause and effect, he immediately recognized its depth. But instead of converting on the spot, he spent weeks testing these ideas, observing his own experience, and verifying each principle. His analytical approach impressed Buddha so much that Sariputta became known as the general of the Dharma. Not because of blind faith, but because he validated every teaching through direct experience. These monasteries weren't just places of worship, they were ancient learning centers with different departments. Some monks specialized in meditation techniques, documenting their findings about different states of consciousness. Others focused on ethical experiments, testing how different behaviors affected both individuals and the community. They even had debate halls where ideas were rigorously challenged and tested. Each morning, monks would gather to share their insights from practice. They'd discuss their meditation experiences, challenge each other's understanding, and collectively refine their methods. It was like a daily peer review session, but instead of studying external phenomena, they were mapping the landscape of human consciousness. Think of Buddha's monasteries like ancient laboratories of the mind. People would come together not just to worship or pray, but to explore consciousness, test ideas, and share discoveries. It was a completely new model of spiritual community. No hierarchical structure based on divine authority, just people supporting each other in their investigations of truth. This approach spread across Asia in a unique way. Unlike prophetic traditions that often spread through conversion, Buddhism spread through demonstration. People saw the results in transformed lives and peaceful communities. Kings and scholars were particularly drawn to this practical approach. Emperor Ashoka of India, for example, was impressed not by miraculous claims, but by how Buddhist teachings created harmony in his kingdom. And here's something fascinating. When Buddhism entered new cultures, it didn't demand they abandon their existing beliefs. Instead, it offered them tools to explore and deepen their own understanding. In China, Taoists could use Buddhist methods. In Japan, Shinto practitioners could apply them. The emphasis wasn't on believing new things, but on seeing more clearly. But an even bigger question remained. Could these two very different paths, divine revelation and personal investigation, somehow work together? What's remarkable is how Buddha's personal discoveries lined up with many teachings that others claimed came from divine revelation. When prophets said, "Be compassionate," they said it was God's command. When Buddha taught compassion, he showed how it naturally creates happiness, both for ourselves and others. Modern science is rediscovering many of Buddha's insights. Neuroscientists studying meditation find that regular practice literally reshapes the brain, just as Buddha taught that mental training could transform consciousness. Psychologists researching happiness have validated his observations that external pleasures bring temporary satisfaction, while inner peace creates lasting contentment. Take the concept of interconnectedness. Buddha observed through meditation how everything exists in relationship, with no truly separate self. Today, quantum physics reveals a similar picture, a universe of interconnected events where nothing exists in isolation. Ecologists map the intricate web of life, showing how each species depends on countless others, exactly the kind of interdependence Buddha described. Even his insights about impermanence align with modern physics. Buddha noticed how everything constantly changes, with no fixed essence. Scientists now describe matter as dynamic patterns of energy in constant flux. Different languages, same discovery. Take the basic moral principles. Prophets received them as divine laws. Buddha found them through observing cause and effect. Don't lie? Buddha saw how lying creates anxiety and breaks trust. Don't steal. He observed how greed leads to suffering and social chaos. Same conclusions, totally different paths to getting there. This overlap is fascinating. It suggests that whether through divine revelation or careful observation, humans can arrive at similar truths about how to live well. It's like two explorers reaching the same mountain peak from different trails, one guided by a map from above, the other finding their way by careful observation of the terrain. Even meditation has parallels in prophetic traditions. Christian monastics, Sufi mystics, and Jewish contemplatives all developed practices for quieting the mind and opening the heart. They described it as connecting with God, while Buddha framed it as seeing reality clearly. Different languages for similar experiences. Interestingly, while Buddha himself avoided prophetic claims, later Buddhist traditions developed elements that resembled prophetic figures. The Mahayana tradition speaks of bodhisattvas, enlightened beings who choose to return and help others. Some Buddhist texts describe Maitreya, a future Buddha who will appear to teach the Dharma anew. Even the Dalai Lama is believed by many to be the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. But there's a crucial difference in how these figures are understood. Rather than delivering divine messages from above, they're seen as examples of what anyone can achieve through practice. They're more like experienced guides who have walked the path before us than messengers delivering words from another realm. Even predictions about Maitreya focus not on divine revelation, but on the idea that wisdom naturally reemerges when conditions are right, like a flower blooming in spring. This evolution shows how spiritual traditions often blend approaches over time. While maintaining Buddha's emphasis on personal investigation, later Buddhists found value in having inspiring figures who exemplified the path's highest possibilities. In our current world of instant answers and endless debates, this bridge between different approaches to truth becomes crucial. We often think we have to choose, either accept things on faith or reject them completely. Buddha showed there's another way. Direct investigation combined with an open mind. Look at the growing interest in mindfulness. Companies aren't adopting meditation because of religious belief. They're seeing practical results. Hospitals don't prescribe mindfulness because of ancient texts. They've verified its benefits through research. Buddha's approach fits perfectly with our modern need to verify things for ourselves. The numbers tell a striking story. Since 2012, meditation app downloads have increased by 2,500%. Over 500 major corporations now offer mindfulness programs. Nearly 40% of Americans report trying meditation, not for religious reasons, but for practical benefits. Major hospitals like Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins now prescribe mindfulness for everything from chronic pain to anxiety. The U.S. military uses meditation to treat PTSD. Schools implementing mindfulness programs report 50% fewer behavioral problems and 38% improved academic performance. These modern applications solve very modern problems. Take information overload. Buddha's techniques for training attention help people navigate today's constant distractions. His methods for handling difficult emotions give people tools for managing modern stress. Even his emphasis on direct experience helps people break free from social media's endless opinions and find their own truth. Many people today combine these approaches naturally. They might draw inspiration from religious teachings while using meditation to understand themselves better. Others might start with scientific skepticism, but discover deeper insights through personal practice. It's not about choosing between faith and investigation. It's about using both to understand life better. Even religious leaders are recognizing this bridge. The Dalai Lama often says if science proves something in Buddhism wrong, Buddhism should change. That's pure Buddha-style thinking. Let direct observation lead the way, even if it challenges traditional beliefs. So is Buddha a prophet? Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Instead of trying to fit Buddha into traditional categories, we might better understand him as someone who showed us a different way to find truth, one that's still revolutionary today. He didn't claim to be a messenger from above, but he did something just as powerful. He showed that profound wisdom isn't locked in heaven, waiting for special messengers to reveal it. It's available to anyone willing to look deeply enough. This isn't about choosing between divine revelation and personal investigation. After all, many of history's great spiritual discoveries share common ground, whether they came through prophetic vision or careful observation. It's about recognizing different paths to understanding. Today, as we face new questions and challenges, Buddha's approach offers something valuable. It reminds us that we don't always need someone else to give us answers. Sometimes, the best way to find truth is to investigate it for ourselves, test it in our own experience, and see what we discover. So maybe the question isn't whether Buddha was a prophet, but whether wisdom itself has to come from above, or if it's been waiting inside us all along. If this exploration sparked something in you, join our growing community of wisdom seekers. Next time, we'll dive into another fascinating aspect of Buddhist thought. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, see for yourself.